Velthar adjusted his datapad and reviewed the list one more time. The screen glowed softly in the dim light of the Galactic Expeditionary Vessel's briefing room. Around him, his research team shuffled through their own notes, preparing for what should be a routine survey mission. Earth, the newest member of the Galactic Coalition, a small blue planet in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. According to all preliminary reports, it was a pleasant world with diverse ecosystems and a surprisingly advanced species that called themselves humans. The humans had submitted their planetary data 3 months ago, and everything seemed normal. Standard fauna, standard flora, nothing remarkable. Velthar was a senior xenobiologist with 20 years of experience. He had cataloged creatures on 47 different worlds. He knew his job well. This mission would be simple. Visit Earth, verify the classifications the humans had submitted, collect samples and recordings, and return home. 3 weeks, maybe 4 at most. His team consisted of 3 junior researchers. Krenek was young and eager, always ready to prove himself. Silthar was careful and methodical, preferring to observe from a distance. Vormesh was the technical specialist, handling all the recording equipment and data analysis. Together they made a solid team. The door to the briefing room slid open with a soft hiss. 2 humans entered, both wearing the standard Coalition liaison uniforms. The taller one was male with dark hair and an easy smile. The shorter one was female, her hair pulled back in a practical style. Both looked professional and friendly. "Good morning," the male human said, his words translated instantly by Velthar's implant. "I'm Jihun. I'm a wildlife biologist. I'll be your primary guide during the survey." "And I'm Sora," the female added. "I'm your safety coordinator. I'll be making sure everyone stays safe during field operations." Velthar stood and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture he had studied. "Welcome aboard. I'm Velthar, lead researcher. We're grateful for your assistance." Jihun shook his hand warmly. Sora did the same, though Velthar noticed her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small creature. Humans were tiny compared to most spacefaring species, barely reaching Velthar's chest height. "Please sit," Velthar gestured to the empty seats. "We were just reviewing the survey schedule. I wanted to go over the itinerary with you both." The humans took their seats. Velthar projected the schedule onto the main screen. "We'll begin in what you call the Kalahari Desert. According to your submitted data, there are several Class 3 scavenger species in that region. Small, non-aggressive, perfect for our first field study." He noticed Jihun and Sora exchange a look. It was brief but unmistakable. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication. "Which species specifically?" Jihun asked, his tone carefully neutral. Velthar scrolled through the data. "Let me see. Several options here. We have meerkats, jackals, and, yes, honey badgers, the Mellivora capensis. According to the database, they're small omnivores, approximately 0.3 meters in height, feeding primarily on insects and carrion. Minimal threat level. They seem ideal for a first contact scenario." Sora made a sound. It took Velthar a moment to realize she was laughing, though she quickly covered her mouth and apologized. Sorry, I just... Jihun, did you tell them?" Jihun rubbed his face with one hand. "Tell them what?" "About the badgers. I thought you were going to tell them." "Why would I? You're the wildlife expert." Velthar felt a prickle of concern. "Is there a problem?" Jihun leaned forward, his expression serious now. "Velthar, I think we need to revise the safety protocols for the Kalahari survey." "Why?" Krenek spoke up from across the table. "The classification is clear. Small scavenger, minimal threat. We've handled much larger predators on other worlds." "I understand," Jihun said carefully, "but your classification system might not fully capture the nature of certain Earth species. The system is standardized across 200-member worlds," Vormesh pointed out. "It's been proven effective." "For those worlds, yes," Sora said. "But Earth is different." Velthar studied both humans. They seemed genuinely concerned, but about what? A creature barely 30 centimeters tall? He had faced down pack hunters twice his size on Draxos Prime. He had observed the swimming predators of Oceanus 7 from barely protected cages. A small scavenger from Earth posed no challenge. "I appreciate your concern," Velthar said diplomatically, "but we are experienced professionals. We've taken every precaution. Our equipment includes shields rated for Class 7 threats, non-lethal deterrence, and full environmental protection. We'll maintain proper observation distances. There's no reason to delay the survey. Ji-hoon opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Sora, who shrugged slightly. We could show them the videos, Sora suggested. They won't believe it until they see it themselves. Ji-hoon replied. You know how it is. Everyone thinks their equipment and training will be enough. What videos? Silthar asked. Footage of honey badgers, Ji-hoon said. But honestly, seeing recordings isn't the same as understanding what you're dealing with. The only way to really understand is to see one in person. Then we'll see one in person, Veltar said firmly. That's why we're here. To observe and document. Just promise me something, Ji-hoon said, his voice serious. When we're in the field, if either Sora or I tell you to get back, you get back immediately. No questions. Can you agree to that? It was an unusual request. Field guides typically deferred to the scientific team's judgment, but Veltar could see the genuine concern in the humans' eyes. Perhaps humans were simply more cautious than most species. It made sense given their small size and lack of natural defenses. Agreed, Veltar said. We will follow your safety recommendations. All of us, Sora added, looking pointedly at Krenak. The young researcher bristled slightly but nodded. Of course. The rest of the briefing continued without incident. They reviewed equipment manifests, emergency protocols, and contact procedures. The humans were professional and knowledgeable, though Velthar noticed they kept exchanging those looks whenever the honey badger survey was mentioned. After the meeting ended and the humans left, Krenak turned to Velthar. They're overcautious. It's a small scavenger. What could possibly happen? Velthar pulled up the honey badger file again. The image showed a stocky creature with black and gray fur, short legs, and a blunt face. It looked harmless. According to the data, it weighed about 9 kilograms on average. Its diet consisted mainly of insects, small rodents, and carrion. Territorial range, moderate. Aggression toward foreign species, minimal. Nothing will happen, Velthar assured his team. We'll observe, we'll record. We'll move on to the next species. Standard procedure. He saved the file and shut down his datapad. Tomorrow they would land on Earth and begin the survey. It would be routine, educational, perhaps even boring. The textbook said small scavenger. The data said minimal threat. Velthar had no reason to doubt either. One, he would learn soon, enough that some lessons couldn't be found in textbooks. The emergency meeting began 2 hours after they returned to base camp. Velthar had called it immediately, overriding the standard debriefing schedule. This was too important to wait. They gathered in the main tent where portable holographic projectors created a makeshift conference room. Krenak sat quietly in the corner, still shaken from the encounter. His hands had finally stopped trembling, but his confidence was broken. Velthar understood. He felt shaken too, and he had been safely inside the rover. I need answers, Velthar said without preamble. The classification system indicated minimal threat. What we encountered was anything but minimal. I need to know why the data was so wrong. Ji-hoon and Sora exchanged another of those looks. Sora tapped her communication device. I'm calling in Minji. She manages Earth's database submissions. She can explain better than we can. A holographic image flickered to life above the central projector. A young human woman appeared, her image slightly transparent but clear. She wore glasses and looked tired, as if she'd been working late hours. Hello, she said, bowing her head slightly in a human gesture of respect. I'm Minji. I understand you had an encounter with a honey badger. That's an understatement, Velthar replied. Your classification system nearly got one of my researchers killed. Our classification system? Minji's expression shifted to something between sympathy and frustration. Velthar, we used your classification system. The Galactic Threat Assessment Matrix. We followed every guideline exactly. Velthar pulled up the matrix on his own projector. Then explain to me how that creature rates as Class 3, minimal threat. It attacked without provocation. It ignored a sonic deterrent. It charged through a shield that should have stopped it. Nothing about its behavior matches the classification. Minji nodded slowly. You're right. But here's the problem. Your matrix evaluates creatures based on size, dietary habits, territorial range, and aggression toward foreign species. By those specific metrics, honey badgers are exactly what the database says. Small omnivorous scavengers with minimal threat ratings. But it attacked. Formesh protested. It didn't consider Krenak a threat, Ji-hoon explained. To understand honey badgers, you need to understand one critical fact. They have no fear response, not a diminished response, not a suppressed response. No response at all. Fear simply doesn't exist in their behavioral programming. Sora pulled up videos on her device and projected them for everyone to see. Watch this. The first video showed a honey badger facing 6 lions. The lions circled it, trying to intimidate it. The honey badger charged them. Not away from them, at them. The lions backed off. The second video showed a honey badger raiding a beehive. Velthar could see hundreds of bees swarming around it, stinging repeatedly. The honey badger ignored them completely, eating honey and larvae as if the bees were not even there. The third video was the most disturbing. A honey badger fought a large snake. The snake bit it. The honey badger collapsed. Velthar thought it was dead. Then after several minutes it stood up and continued eating the snake. "That's not possible," Silthar whispered. "That was a puff adder," Taeyang said. "Its venom can kill a human in hours." The honey badger was unconscious for 2 hours, then woke up and finished its meal. Minji continued her explanation. "Honey badgers have skin that's almost impossible to bite through. They can twist inside their own skin to attack predators that grab them. They have a resistance to venom that we still don't fully understand. They're intelligent enough to use tools, and they have absolutely no concept of strategic retreat. Evolution built them wrong," Jihoon added, "or built them perfectly, depending on your perspective. They survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth by simply refusing to lose." Velthar stared at the frozen image of the honey badger on the screen. "But your matrix accounts for aggression toward foreign species," Minji emphasized. "That's the key phrase. The matrix measures how aggressive a creature is toward things it doesn't recognize. Honey badgers show equal aggression toward everything. They're not xenophobic. They're universally hostile. Your matrix can't account for that because no other known species behaves this way. But there must be other creatures like this on Earth," Formesh said. "Apex predators, surely." Sora laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'd think so. But some of our most dangerous animals aren't apex predators at all. We have swans that will drown dogs that get too close to their nests. We have geese that have forced aircraft to make emergency landings. We have hippos that kill more humans annually than crocodiles, lions, and elephants combined. And cassowaries," Jihoon added. "Birds. Flightless birds with claws like daggers that can disembowel a human with one kick." "Then there's everything from Australia," Taeyang said with a slight smile. "But we don't talk about Australia on the first day." Velthar felt a headache forming behind his eyes. "How many species are misclassified?" Minji pulled up a list. It scrolled across the holographic display for several long seconds. "We've been flagging this issue for months. Your classification system works perfectly for most coalition worlds, but Earth is different. Our evolutionary path was different. Most species in the galaxy evolved in environments where displays of aggression were sufficient to avoid conflict. Actual violence was costly, so creatures developed threat displays, territorial markers, and social hierarchies to minimize fighting." "And Earth?" Velthar asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "High biodiversity, intense competition, limited resources in many environments. The result is that many Earth species developed what we call absolute commitment strategies. They don't bluff. They don't posture. When they fight to win or die trying." The tent fell silent. Velthar looked at his team. Kreenak was pale. Silthar looked thoughtful. Formesh was reviewing the honey badger footage again, frame by frame, as if he could find a logical explanation in the data. "We need to halt the survey," Velthar said finally. "Immediately. We cannot continue using the current classification system. It's not just inaccurate, it's dangerous." "Agreed," Sora said. "Until we can develop Earth-specific protocols, any fieldwork is too risky." Jihoon nodded. "I'll help you draft a report for the Coalition. This needs to go to the highest levels. Other survey teams will be coming to Earth. They need to know what they're really dealing with." Minji spoke from her hologram. "I'll start pulling together all the species that need reclassification. It's going to be a long list. Velthar, I'm sorry you had to learn this way. We tried to warn the Coalition Committee months ago, but they insisted the Matrix was sufficient." "It's not your fault," Velthar said, though part of him wondered if the humans could have tried harder to make them understand. But then again, would he have listened? He had been so confident in his experience, his training, his equipment. He had dismissed their concerns as overcautiousness. Pride, he realized, had nearly killed Kreenak. Taeyang stood and walked to the tent's entrance, looking out at the desert. "You know what the real lesson is here?" Humans aren't the strongest species on our planet. We're not the fastest. We're definitely not the most dangerous. But we learned to live alongside all of these creatures. We respected what we couldn't overpower. We avoided what we couldn't respect. And we used our intelligence to find ways to survive anyway. Velthar joined him at the entrance. In the distance, he could see the twisted acacia tree where they had encountered the honey badger. It seemed so peaceful now, just another part of the landscape. We're persistence hunters, Jihan said, joining them. We don't win by being the strongest. We win by outlasting everything else, by learning, by adapting. That's probably humanity's real strength. Velthar turned to face his team and the humans. Then let's learn. Let's adapt. We need to build a new system. An Earth-specific system. Who's with me? Everyone raised their hands. Even Kreenak, though his hand shook slightly. Good, Velthar said. Because I suspect the honey badger is just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Velthar found himself in a very different kind of meeting. The conference room was on Proxima Station, the Coalition's main administrative hub. Instead of a small team in a desert tent, he now faced representatives from 30 different worlds, all gathered to address what was being called the Earth Classification Crisis. The incident with the honey badger had spread quickly through Coalition channels. Other survey teams on Earth had reported similar problems. A zoological team studying harmless aquatic birds had been attacked by a territorial swan. A botanical expedition had stumbled into a nest of non-aggressive social insects that turned out to be African honeybees. Nobody had died yet, but it was only a matter of time. Beside Velthar sat 2 new human representatives. Yuna was a behavioral ecologist, specializing in aggressive animal behavior. Seokjin was a data system specialist who had spent years trying to make Earth's creatures fit into the galactic matrix. Both looked exhausted but determined. The problem is fundamental, Yuna explained to the assembled representatives. Her presentation showed comparison charts between Earth species and similar creatures from other Coalition worlds. Most species in the galaxy evolved in environments where conflict avoidance was the primary survival strategy. Displays of aggression, territory marking, social hierarchies, all designed to minimize actual combat. Fighting is expensive. It risks injury. Evolution on most worlds favored those who could avoid fights. Seokjin took over, pulling up a 3-dimensional map of Earth. Earth had a different evolutionary path. High biodiversity means more competition. Varied environments means different survival strategies. The result is thousands of species that don't follow galactic norms. One of the representatives, a tall crystalline being from Nexus 4, spoke up. But surely your apex predators follow standard patterns? Large carnivores with predictable hunting strategies? Yuna smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Let me show you some examples. The screen changed to show a creature labeled Wolverine. It looked similar to a honey badger, stocky and low to the ground. This is a Wolverine, Yuna said. Similar size to a honey badger, current classification, small scavenger, minimal threat. Reality has been documented driving bears off their kills, bears that outweigh it by 300 kilograms. It won't back down. It won't give up. It just keeps fighting until the bear decides the meal isn't worth it. Next image, a tiny creature, barely larger than a human thumb. This is a shrew. Your database lists it as a harmless insectivore. In reality, it must eat nearly its body weight every day or it will die. This makes it one of the most aggressive creatures on Earth. It will attack anything, including humans. Some species are venomous, but it's classified as harmless because of its size. The images continued. Each one showed a creature whose database classification was catastrophically wrong. A Tasmanian devil with the strongest bite force per body size of any mammal. A mantis shrimp that could strike with the force of a bullet. A hippopotamus that looked slow and lazy, but killed more humans than any large predator in Africa. I still don't understand, another representative said. How did humans become the dominant species on this planet? You're surrounded by these creatures. You're small. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. Ji-hoon, who had joined them for the presentation, stood to answer. We learned. We respected what we couldn't overpower. We avoided what we couldn't respect. We used our intelligence to survive. And we're persistence hunters. We don't need to be the strongest if we can outlast everything else. We can run for hours. We can sweat to cool down while other animals overheat. We can plan and cooperate and use tools. That was enough. Yuna pulled up a new set of data. But the real issue is that your classification matrix can't account for Earth's diversity. We need a new system. We're proposing the Death World Adaptive Scale. The room erupted in murmurs. Death World was a term used for planets so hostile that they were considered unsuitable for colonization. Earth didn't look like a death world. It had pleasant weather, abundant water, and beautiful landscapes. Seokjin displayed the new classification system. The Death World Adaptive Scale accounts for behavioral patterns that your matrix ignores. Actual combat willingness versus display aggression. Presence or absence of fear responses. Willingness to engage in suicidal defense. Resistance to standard deterrence. Environmental toxin tolerance. Pain tolerance levels. Under this system, Yuna continued, honey badgers receive a threat level 9 rating, the same as a Draxian war beast. The room exploded in protests. War beasts were 3 meters tall and bred specifically for combat. How could a 9-kilogram scavenger possibly rate the same threat level? Velthar stood and the room quieted. He had become something of a reluctant celebrity after the honey badger incident. His near disaster had possibly saved lives by revealing the classification problem before someone actually died. I was skeptical too, he said. I had 20 years of experience. I had equipment rated for Class 7 threats. I had confidence in the system. But the honey badger taught me something important. Size doesn't matter if the creature refuses to lose. Technology doesn't matter if the creature doesn't understand fear. Experience doesn't matter if all your experience is with creatures that follow predictable patterns. He pulled up the footage from Kreenok's encounter. The assembled representatives watched in silence as the small creature charged through deterrents and shields, attacking again and again with absolutely no regard for its own safety. This is why we need a new system, Velthar continued, not just for honey badgers. For all Earth species that don't fit galactic norms, we need to protect survey teams. We need accurate data, and we need to acknowledge that our current understanding of fauna classification has a massive blind spot. The meeting continued for hours. There were debates about methodology, arguments about threat assessment, and concerns about setting precedents. But slowly, consensus formed. Earth needed its own classification system. By the end of the day, they had established the basic framework. The Death World Adaptive Scale would run parallel to the standard galactic matrix. Any creature that displayed atypical behavior patterns would be flagged for special assessment. 3 categories were established. Standard behavior, indicating creatures that followed galactic norms. Adaptive behavior, indicating creatures with unusual but manageable traits. And disproportionate threat, indicating creatures whose danger level far exceeded their physical size or apparent capabilities. Honey badgers became the first species officially designated as disproportionate threat entities. As the meeting adjourned, the Nexus 4 representative approached Velthar. I want to apologize. When I first heard about your encounter, I thought you must have made mistakes. But after seeing the data, after understanding the scope of the problem, I realize you probably saved lives by bringing this to our attention. Don't thank me, Velthar said. Thank Jihun and Sora. They tried to warn us. We didn't listen. But you learned, the representative replied. That's what matters. You learned and you adapted. Very human of you. Velthar smiled at that. I'll take that as a compliment. Yuna and Seokjin approached with datapads full of notes. We have 463 more species to reclassify, Yuna said. This is going to take months. Then we'd better get started, Velthar replied. The next survey team arrives on Earth in 6 weeks. We need to have the new system operational before then. Seokjin nodded. Agreed, though I should warn you, some of the creatures we need to reclassify make honey badgers look reasonable. Show me, Velthar said. Seokjin pulled up a file labeled Orcas. Velthar started reading. His eyes grew wider with each sentence. This can't be real, he whispered. Welcome to Earth, Yuna said with a tired smile, where even the textbooks lie. 6 months after the honey badger incident, Velthar stood before a packed auditorium at the Coalition Science Academy on Proxima Station. The lecture hall could hold 300 beings and every seat was filled. Another 500 were watching via hologram from other locations across Coalition space. His lecture series, The Honey Badger Incident, a case study in xenobehavioral assessment failure, had become unexpectedly popular. What started as an academic presentation had turned into something closer to entertainment. Students wanted to hear the story. Researchers wanted to learn from his mistakes. Everyone wanted to understand how a 9-kilogram creature had nearly killed a trained xenobiologist. Ji-hoon and Sora sat in the front row, along with Ariam, a human wildlife filmmaker who had spent the last 4 months documenting Earth species for the new database. All three wore expressions of bemused patience. They had heard this lecture before. "Good evening," Velthar began. "Before we start, I want to be clear about something. This presentation is not about how foolish I was, though I was foolish. It's not about how dangerous Earth is, though Earth is dangerous. It's about how intelligence means recognizing the limits of your knowledge, and how assumptions can be deadly in xenobiology." He pulled up the now famous image. The honey badger from the Kalahari, frozen mid-charge, its face showing nothing but pure determination. This is Mellivora capensis, the honey badger. According to the Galactic Threat Assessment Matrix, it should have been classified as a small scavenger with minimal threat potential. According to reality, it's one of the most fearless creatures in the known galaxy. The audience laughed, as they always did at this point. Velthar had learned to time his delivery for maximum effect. "Let me show you what happened when one of my researchers approached this creature." He played the footage from Kreenok's equipment. The audience gasped at the charge through the sonic deterrent. They gasped again at the repeated attacks on the shield. By the time the video reached the part where Ji-hoon and Taeyang had to physically intervene, the auditorium was completely silent. "That creature weighs approximately 9 kilograms, Velthar said into the quiet. "It is 30 centimeters tall. It was not defending a nest. It was not protecting food. It was not cornered or threatened. It simply decided that my researcher was in its space and spaces belong to honey badgers." More nervous laughter from the audience. Now, some of you might be thinking that this was an outlier, one aggressive individual. Let me show you more footage. Ariam had done excellent work. The compilation video showed honey badgers from different regions, different situations, all displaying the same behavior. Fighting lions, ignoring bee stings, recovering from snake venom, raiding human camps, attacking vehicles. "The pattern is consistent," Velthar continued. "Honey badgers do not run. They do not back down. They have no fear response. Not a diminished response. No response at all. Evolution removed fear from their behavioral programming entirely." A student in the middle rows raised a hand. "But why? What evolutionary advantage does fearlessness provide? Surely fear exists for a reason." It was Ji-hoon who answered, standing from his seat. "On most worlds, yes. Fear prevents unnecessary conflict, but honey badgers evolved in an environment with extreme competition and limited resources. Being small was a disadvantage. Being fearless compensated for it. Nothing wants to fight a creature that refuses to lose. It's not worth the injury risk. So predators learn to leave honey badgers alone." Sora added, "It's a survival strategy based on reputation. One honey badger fights a lion. The lion wins but gets badly injured in the process. That lion tells other lions, metaphorically speaking. Eventually, even apex predators decide honey badgers aren't worth the effort." "Which brings us to the core lesson," Velthar said, taking back control of the presentation. "The Galactic Threat Assessment Matrix is based on the assumption that all creatures follow logical survival patterns. But Earth evolved differently. High biodiversity, intense competition. The result is creatures that defy our expectations." He pulled up a comparison chart. "Under our old system, honey badgers were Class 3 threats. Under the new Death World adaptive scale, they're threat level 9 with a special designation. Disproportionate threat entity." The screen changed to show more Earth creatures. "And they're not alone. Let me introduce you to some other disproportionate threats from Earth." Ariam's footage played. A swan attacking a dog. A hippo charging a boat. A cassowary demonstrating its lethal kick. A tiny octopus that could kill with venom despite being small enough to hide in a shell. "The most dangerous aspect of Earth's fauna," Velthar explained, "is that you cannot judge threat level by appearance. Some of the smallest creatures are the most dangerous. Some of the most placid-looking animals are the most aggressive. Earth challenges every assumption we've made about evolutionary behavior patterns." Another student raised a hand. "How did humans survive if they're surrounded by all these dangerous creatures?" It was a question Velthar had been asked dozens of times. He gestured to Ji-hoon to answer. The human stood again, his expression thoughtful. We learned. We observed. We respected what we couldn't overpower. We avoided what we couldn't respect. And we used our intelligence to find advantages. We're persistence hunters. We can run for hours while other animals overheat. We can sweat to cool down. We can plan and cooperate and use tools. We don't win by being the strongest. We win by outlasting everything else. That adaptability, Velthar added, might be humanity's greatest strength. They didn't try to dominate their environment through force. They learned to coexist with it. That's a valuable lesson for all of us in xenobiology. The lecture continued for another hour. Velthar showed more examples, answered more questions, and explained the new classification system in detail. He talked about the 463 species that had been reclassified. He discussed the new mandatory protocols for Earth surveys. He even showed footage of some creatures that made honey badgers look reasonable. The hippo segment was particularly effective at generating shocked gasps from the audience. During the question and answer session, a junior researcher asked, "Are there any Earth creatures that are actually as harmless as they look?" The three humans exchanged looks. "Some," Sora said carefully, "but we recommend assuming they're not until proven otherwise." "Defensive pessimism," Ariam added. "It's kept humans alive for thousands of years." As the lecture wound down, Velthar displayed one final image. It was from the Kalahari, showing the honey badger in the distance peacefully digging in the sand. "This creature taught me the most important lesson of my career," he said. "Respect is not about size. Caution is not about fear. And sometimes the textbooks are dangerously, catastrophically wrong. The galactic matrix worked perfectly for 200 worlds. But it failed on Earth because Earth evolved differently. That's not a weakness of the system. It's a reminder that the universe is bigger and stranger than any system can account for." He paused, looking out at the assembled students and researchers. "Earth has joined the coalition. More survey teams will visit. More researchers will study its ecosystems. My hope is that by sharing this story, by admitting my mistakes, I can help ensure that nobody else learns these lessons the hard way. Because the honey badger was patient with us. It could have seriously injured Kreenak. It chose not to. We were lucky." The auditorium erupted in applause. Velthar bowed in the human style he had learned, then stepped down from the podium. Later in his office, Velthar looked at the photo he kept on his desk. The honey badger from the Kalahari, doing what honey badgers do. Beneath it, a caption in human English. "Not all who wander are lost, but all who mess with honey badgers are stupid." Jihoon had taught him that phrase. It made Velthar smile every time he read it. Earth's entry in the galactic database had been updated. It now carried a warning visible before any species information loaded. Warning: Planet Earth is classified as a Class 4 death world. Native fauna demonstrate atypical aggression patterns, abnormal pain tolerance, and frequent absence of self-preservation instincts. Standard threat assessment protocols do not apply. Mandatory human guide requirement for all surface expeditions. Approach all native fauna with extreme caution regardless of size. Below that, in smaller text, Special Advisory. Creature designation honey badger maintains active do not engage status. Classification disproportionate threat entity level 9, no exceptions. Velthar had argued for that last line personally. Some lessons were too important to learn through experience. His communication device chimed, a message from Kreenak, who had returned to fieldwork after 3 months of recovery time. The young researcher had learned his lesson well. His message was brief. Just completed successful survey of Titan 4. All creatures matched classifications. It was boring. I miss Earth. Velthar laughed and sent a reply. Be careful what you wish for. Outside his window, the stars glowed against the black of space. Somewhere out there was Earth with its honey badgers and hippos and all the other creatures that refused to follow the rules. It was dangerous. It was unpredictable. It was fascinating. And Velthar was already planning his return trip. This time he would listen to the humans. The Kalahari Desert stretched out before them like an endless sea of red sand and scattered shrubs. The morning sun was already hot, even though they had arrived at dawn. Velthar stood beside the survey rover, breathing in the dry air through his environmental filter. Earth's atmosphere was surprisingly pleasant, though the heat would have been uncomfortable without the team's climate-controlled suits. A third human had joined them at the base camp. His name was Taeyang, a local conservationist who knew the desert better than anyone. He was older than Ji-hoon and Sora, his face weathered by years of sun and wind. He spoke to Ji-hoon in their native language, something called Korean, and the translation device caught fragments of their conversation. "Did you show them the videos?" Taeyang asked. "They wouldn't believe me," Ji-hoon replied, shaking his head. Both men looked concerned, but Velthar was too excited to worry about it. This was his first time on Earth, and already the planet was fascinating. The ecosystem here was harsh but beautiful. He could see small birds in the distance, and tracks in the sand suggested numerous species lived in this seemingly barren place. The team loaded into the rover. It was a human vehicle, modified for coalition use with comfortable seating and excellent visibility. Taeyang took the driver's position with Ji-hoon beside him. Velthar, Sora, and the 3 junior researchers sat in the back. They drove for nearly 2 hours across the desert. Taeyang pointed out various animals as they went. A family of meerkats standing sentinel near their burrow, a large bird that he called a secretary bird, even a distant herd of springbok. All of them matched their database classifications perfectly. Velthar began to relax. This survey was going exactly as planned. Then Taeyang stopped the rover. He pointed to marks in the sand near a twisted acacia tree. "Tracks," he said quietly. "Fresh, there's one nearby." "A honey badger?" Velthar asked, his pulse quickening with excitement. "Yes." Taeyang turned in his seat to face them. "We should observe from the rover. The windows are reinforced. We can get good footage from here." Krenak was already gathering his recording equipment. "I need to be closer for proper data collection. The rover's sensors are good, but nothing beats direct observation." "I don't think that's wise," Ji-hoon said carefully. "It's a Class 3 Scavenger," Krenak replied, a hint of impatience in his voice. "I've observed Class 6 predators at close range. This creature weighs less than 10 kilograms. He moved toward the rover's exit. "I'm trained for this," Velthar hesitated. The humans did seem genuinely worried, but Krenak was right. They were trained professionals. They had equipment rated for threats far larger than a small scavenger, and they needed good data. "Go ahead," Velthar said, "but maintain standard observation distance. 3 meters minimum." Krenak nodded and exited the rover. Ji-hoon immediately reached for his door handle, but Sora put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said, looking at Taeyang. The conservationist was already activating the rover's external cameras. His face was grim. "Let him learn," he said quietly. "We'll be ready." Through the windows, they watched Krenak approach the acacia tree. His scanner was active, recording environmental data. His shield generator was clipped to his belt, ready to deploy. He moved with confidence, staying low, making himself less threatening to the animal. Then they saw it. The honey badger emerged from behind the tree, its black and gray fur stark against the red sand. It was digging, its powerful claws tearing into the earth with surprising speed. Even from the rover, Velthar could see it was exactly as the database described. Small, stocky, with a distinctive white stripe along its back. It looked unimpressive. Almost cute, in a rugged way. Krenak moved closer, his scanner extended. He was still 5 meters away, farther than the minimum safe distance. He was doing everything correctly. The honey badger stopped digging. It turned around slowly, fixing its gaze on Krenak. What happened next would haunt Velthar's dreams for months. The creature didn't flee. It didn't make warning sounds. It didn't posture or display aggression signals. It simply charged. Krenak stumbled backward in surprise. He activated his sonic deterrent, the device that had successfully repelled creatures twice his size on other worlds. The high-frequency pulse filled the air, invisible but powerful enough to cause discomfort to any animal's hearing. The honey badger ran straight through it as if it didn't exist. Krenak's training kicked in. He activated his shield generator. A shimmering barrier of energy formed in front of him, rated to stop a charging creature of up to 150 kilograms. The shield had never failed. The honey badger hit the shield at full speed. The impact made a dull thud that they could hear inside the rover. The creature bounced back, rolled, and immediately charged again. It was making sounds now. Terrible sounds that the translation device rendered as a series of error messages, followed by the words, "untranslatable fury." Inside the rover, Jihun and Taeyang were already moving. They grabbed large padded shields from a storage compartment and rushed out. Their movements were fast and practiced, like soldiers who had trained for exactly this scenario. "Stay behind us," Jihun shouted to Krenak. The two humans positioned themselves between the researcher and the honey badger, holding their shields low. They didn't try to hurt the animal. They simply stood their ground, creating a barrier with their bodies. The honey badger made several more charges at the shields. Each time it hit, it bounced back and immediately attacked again. There was no hesitation, no fear, no tactical retreat. It simply kept attacking over and over as if pain and defeat were concepts it had never learned. Velthar watched through the window, his body frozen in shock. This was impossible. The creature was tiny. It should have fled from the sonic deterrent. The shield should have stopped it. Nothing about this matched any behavior pattern he had ever studied. Finally, unable to see Krenak anymore and faced with two tall humans, the honey badger backed away. But it didn't run. It didn't slink off in defeat. It simply turned and walked back to its digging spot, as if deciding that killing these intruders would take more time than they were worth. Krenak stumbled back to the rover, his face pale, his hands shaking. Jihun and Taeyang followed, moving backward, keeping their shields up until they were safely inside. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Outside, the honey badger continued digging as if nothing had happened. That, Velthar finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, was a minimal threat. Jihun wiped sweat from his forehead despite the rover's climate control. No, that was a honey badger being relatively calm. You didn't threaten its food source. You didn't get near its den. You didn't corner it. He looked at Krenak, his expression sympathetic but firm. You're lucky. Very lucky. Sora was checking something on her datapad. The shield recorded the impacts. It hit with enough force that anything without its particular adaptations would have broken bones. Multiple times. It didn't care. Formesh pulled up the footage from Krenak's equipment. They watched it again in slow motion. The honey badger's face as it charged showed no fear, no anger, no emotion that Velthar could recognize. Just pure absolute determination. I don't understand, Silthar said quietly. Why didn't it run? Every creature has self-preservation instincts. Taeyang started the rover and turned them back toward base camp. Not honey badgers, he said. They don't run. They don't back down. They don't quit. That's not bravery. That's not even aggression. That's just what they are. As they drove away, Velthar looked back at the honey badger. It was still digging, completely unbothered by the encounter. And for the first time in his 20-year career, Velthar realized that his textbook might be dangerously, catastrophically wrong.